Welcome to Lesson 49 of the Jamf 100 course, Configuration Profiles for macOS. My name is Kyle, and today we'll take a look at enforcing settings and restrictions on computers in our environment. What we'll do in this lesson is cover basics for configuration profiles, review how they're deployed, as well as create a couple. Let's start with what configuration profiles are. They're XML or .mobile config files that provide an easy way to define settings or restrictions for a computer. The cool thing is the file format is the same for iOS, tvOS, and macOS. However, the profile payloads we can deliver may differ. We deploy these using MDM and APNS, which is represented by this diagram here. Once we issue an MDM command from Jamf Pro, a notification is provided for Apple to deliver to our scope devices through Apple's push notification service. When our devices communicate with APNS, they receive the notification and reach out to Jamf Pro, who delivers the management task for our device. Once the task has been received, Jamf Pro reaches out one more time to APNS to mark the task as resolved. If we have 100 computers scoped for this profile, this process will occur 100 times, once per device. So with that said, let's go ahead and create a couple of configuration profiles. Let's go to our Jamf Pro server. And since we're covering computers in this lesson, we'll click on the Computers tab. On the left side, we'll click on Configuration Profiles. And we have the option to create new profiles or upload existing profiles. We're going to create a new one. And let's call this profile passcode. We have the option to provide a description, which could be helpful for our other administrators. And select a category. I'll put this under Configuration Profiles for macOS, and a distribution method. I'm guessing not many of our users would voluntarily install a passcode requirement from self-service, so I'll leave this at Install Automatically on the computer level, which will affect all local users on that computer. As you can see, we have a number of different payloads we can configure on the left side here. I'm going to focus on a couple of these as a brief introduction. Let's click on the passcode payload and configure and see what our options are. Requirements for passcode compliance will vary from organization to organization, and we have several options for enforcing either lax or strict passcode requirements. For example, if I manage a highly secure government agency or healthcare organization containing confidential information, I may require my users to set a 14-digit passcode that will expire every 30 days. We have a few other options for lock timeouts, passcode history, which requires users to input unique passcode before reusing old ones, and maximum number of failed attempts before locking the computer, prohibiting access to data after so many attempts have been made. Next, we'll need to scope this profile out. I'm going to click on the Scope tab, leave this to specific computers, and add my targets. We can see my computer on the list, and the reason only a couple of computers show up is they're the only computers in our database with MDM profiles installed, making them MDM capable. I can also scope to groups, buildings, and departments. I'm going to add the Minneapolis building to my scope, hit Done, and hit Save. If we hit Done at the bottom, we can see our deployment has completed, as my computer is currently in the Minneapolis building. We can verify the installation by going to System Preferences, clicking on Profiles in the bottom right, and we can see that the profile has installed on our computer with our minimum length and maximum age specified here. We can also verify this by going back, clicking on Users and Groups, unlocking this pane by clicking the lock at the bottom left, and attempting to change my local user's passcode. If the passcode I provide doesn't fit the criteria, the computer will let me know. Let's create another configuration profile, one with the network payload this time. Again, I'm going to click New at the top right, provide a name, and a category, and configure this to install automatically. Beneath passcode, I'll click on the network payload, click Configure, Select my network interface, either Wi-Fi or Ethernet, and provide the name of the network we want our users to have access to. If the network is hidden, we can specify that information and configure whether we want computers to auto-join this network. If it's behind a proxy, we can configure those settings from the pop-up and furnish the network's password if it's secured. This network is behind WPA2, so I'm going to select WPA2 Personal and provide the password. Lastly, we're going to scope this out. We'll click on the Scope tab, leave it at specific computers, click Add, and if we remember from our groups lesson, we create a group called Cart. I'm going to add this group to the scope and click Done. With this scope, only those computers in the specified group will receive this profile. I'm going to go ahead and click Save, and again click Done. We can see our scope on the right side. Let's create one more configuration profile to enforce restrictions. Let's click New and provide a name. I'm going to call this Restrictions and add it to a category. Next, we'll scroll down to the Restrictions payload on the left and click Configure. As you can see, we have a few options here. We're not going to configure all of these, but we will take a look at preferences and functionality. If I check the box under Preferences, you'll see that we have two radio buttons, one for Enable and one for Disable. By default, the Enable button is selected, so be careful which button you select depending on your end goal. I'm going to switch the radio button to Disable Selected Items and go ahead and select General. When we deploy this, users will no longer have access to the General pane of System Preferences. Let's go ahead and take a look at functionality. Here we can lock the desktop picture by checking the box and providing the path to the picture. The picture must live on that computer. In this case, I have a picture I can set in my shared folder called minneapolis.jpg. Once we've finished, we'll click on the scope. I'm going to use the drop-down to scope to all computers, excluding the IT department. Once we've configured our scope, I'll hit Save, and in a moment, we'll see my desktop background change. And see I no longer have access to the General pane in System Preferences. Last thing I'd like to point out is our Optimizing Configuration Profile Payload Management knowledge base article on Jamf Nation. Typically, we want to keep our configuration profiles as granular as possible, which makes scoping and troubleshooting much easier and prevents payloads from conflicting with each other. For example, we cannot deploy two configuration profiles to the same computer that lock the desktop picture to two different images. Only one restriction will be respected. That's it for macOS configuration profiles. In this lesson, we covered creating configuration profiles to enforce passcode compliance and restrictions, along with providing our end users Wi-Fi. We encourage keeping profile payloads separate for troubleshooting should the need arise, and ensuring those profiles are scoped appropriately before sending them into your production environment. This has been Lesson 49, Configuration Profiles for macOS. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.